Recently, Benjamin Tal, the Canadian macroeconomic guru of CIBC, went on BNN Bloomberg and stunned the entire country by exposing the truth about immigration to Canada and the fact that our country cannot even correctly count the amount of people immigrating here from other countries. And even though the official numbers say that somewhere between 465 and 500,000 people immigrated here last year, that the true number is actually at least double that. And that may be one of the real reasons that rents have soared nationwide by as much as 18.2%. And I'm going to talk about that in today's video when I review the full article out of the Financial Post because, well, the Financial Post had pictures and Bloomberg didn't. But of course, not until after you subscribe to the channel because Canada can't count its growing population, but this channel can. And I am on a race to 10,000 subscribers and would love to increase the size of this channel quicker than JT can import people to pay for his reckless spending. And then hopefully each one of you now subscribed to the channel can also click the like button to help me get this information out to at least 500,000 new people coming to Canada each year. So thank you for that. And now on to the video all about Canada's inability to plan for the mass population growth and how it's affecting the real estate market. So I'm going to pop you into this article here and do what everybody loves, which is read you an article that somebody else wrote. But that's how we get our information, and I'm going to put my own spin on it as I usually try and do. So the title is Rents Are Soaring in Canada as Surge of People Goes Uncounted. Canada's explosive population growth from immigration is causing rents to surge. And yes, I am personally seeing that in my marketplace. I want to say we did more than 20% last year. Obviously, it says in Canada's biggest cities. And there's another problem, and that is the country isn't even able to properly count the number of people who need homes. But here's the best part and why I picked the Financial Post. And I said Bloomberg didn't have this picture. I want to show you the actual graph of people. And this says international migration to Canada spikes, number of migrants and non-permanent residents hits a record high. So now this is going to be the part of the article you want to really focus on. The number you're hearing, that 465 to 500,000, wherever that is permanent residents and new citizens, people coming and immigrating here. However, this number tracks non-permanent residents as well. And look at this chart. Now, this goes all the way back to 1976, but we're going to focus on up here on the right-hand side, where obviously we had almost no people migrating here physically at the start of the pandemic. Now, that didn't stop us from immigrating people here to Canada, but more on that in a minute. And now you're seeing this massive spike of actual physical. Now, this is physical bodies coming into the country and not just permanent residence cards or citizenship being handed out. So as you can see, that is a crazy spike, and we don't see that changing. But let's get a little bit further into the article. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government plans to welcome 465,000 new permanent residents this year. So that is PR cards, meaning that, yes, those people can now buy properties, even though they are technically foreigners, but they are immigrating here. So now they can buy properties and they are exempt from the foreign buyer ban, and increase the annual target to 500,000 by 2025. But those often cited numbers understate the pressure on the country's limited supply of housing because they don't include the wave of, and this is where it starts, foreign students, temporary workers, and others with non-permanent visas. And those can be people like specialty workers or just people here that are here for a few years and they are not going to stay. But let's keep moving on. The country actually had close to 1 million international arrivals last year, according to the analysis done by CIBC, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, that included visas, in other words, work permits or other reasons for coming to the country other than immigration. And it will probably accept a similar number this year, 2023, according to Ben Tal. Now, if you don't know who Ben Tal is, he is probably one of the leading voices in macroeconomics. He is the top guy as far as I'm concerned. Maybe he's got a boss, but he's the top guy at CIBC, and he is one of the smartest minds. Now, I do recommend watching this interview. I did watch this interview that he did with BNN Bloomberg. Ben's got a super thick accent, but he does an amazing job of telling people exactly what's going on, and he's quite entertaining. So I recommend checking that out if you can find it. So as a result, Canada is experiencing the fastest population growth since the 1970s, and apartments have become extremely hard to find. The vacancy rate on rental buildings is below 2%, which is crazy low and the lowest since 2001. In Vancouver, close to my marketplace here, less than 1%. The situation is made worse by rising interest rates that have made buying a home unaffordable for many people, pushing them into the market for rental properties. So obviously, with interest rates going up, house prices themselves have come down. But if you're adding, let's call it somewhere around 500, in this article, anywhere from 300 to 500,000 extra people that are not going accounted for, that are now unable to buy properties at all because, well, we now have a foreign buyer ban here in Canada and crazy taxes both in the GTA and in BC for foreign buyers. Well, those people have to move into rental stock. And that is a big contributing factor to why rents have driven up so quickly over the past year or so. Let's keep going here. We are underestimating how many people are here and how many people are requiring real estate. If you don't have official numbers showing the demand accurately, municipalities making allocations for housing, and this is again future housing, are missing the magnitude of the housing they needed. So what Ben has said here is, sure, we think there's 500,000 people that have come in this last year or will be coming in each year for the next 3. And as a result of that, we need so much housing. I want to say the numbers can often be like 250,000 new houses, assuming that each household's going to average 2 people. Well, we're not building that many houses, so that's a problem. But if that number is actually double what they say is coming in, these are physical bodies, not people that are here to stay long term, but they may be here for school for a 4-year period or whatever. If we're welcoming that many new people and the cities are planning for a quarter of that many people, well, it's no doubt that we are going to continue to have a housing crunch. The consequences of undercounting can already be seen, said Tal. Rent inflation was nearly 6% in the last 2 months of 2022, accelerating from 3.1% the previous year. Obviously, they go on to talk about how much you can actually increase rents. Here in BC, we've seen as little as 0% increases up to about 2.5% increases since the pandemic. It used to be inflation plus 2%. If that was still this year, we would have seen like an 8% increase or 7.4% increase, but that is not the case. However, when one tenant leaves and a new one comes in, it's at that point that we're calculating that number now at an 18.2% year-over-year increase. Then they go on to quote somebody else, Mark, who says it's a dire situation, and he represents one of Canada's biggest apartment suppliers. Local government red tape, obviously we know, trying to get anything approved right now. Actually, one of the local stories here in Vancouver was that a $700 million developer in Vancouver has filed for bankruptcy protection. And at that time, when you actually read the fine print on that, a good reason for that is they cannot get their properties approved for development in the city of Vancouver. Then they go on to talk about the fact that, now the housing policies that are currently in place are not in line with Trudeau's approach to immigration. Obviously, then highlighting the fact that the combination of turning up the amount of people and turning down the amount of development is a really bad thing for Canada as a whole and for Canadian home prices in the future. Then it goes on to talk about, and we are seeing this, so this is kind of going to be the natural progression in the country, in my market for sure, but Toronto is mentioned here. There was about 100,000 people that left Toronto and the GTA in Ontario last year. However, the new immigrants are moving into Toronto and Vancouver, and then the people that were living there, a lot of my clients were now moving on to cheaper and more affordable places, obviously Calgary, Edmonton. And from here, you're talking the interior and Vancouver Island. And then it goes on to elaborate about exactly that, the people moving to different sectors. They start to elaborate about how, Canada kind of does need to pick individuals that have skills to actually build the homes because, yeah, if you're going to have immigration, you got to bring some people in that can help build the new homes that are needed. And then obviously it doesn't have to be said any further than that probably, but Tal reiterates it's very misleading because Canada is focusing on the number of new permanent residents when calculating housing needed. But there's a whole lot going on out there with the statistics that are underestimating the demand. Another thing that Ben elaborated on in the interview was, for instance, I'll give you an example. They brought up a town like Guelph where they have a lot of university students. Those university students will be 9 or 10 months of the year in a lease or some sort of rental. Sure, there's some student housing, but you may be also in, basement suites or some sort of apartments. Well, if those on the census, if those students checkmarked that they would be moving back home to their parents' house during the summer, those people who are taking up for 10 months of the year a residence, well, they have been now removed from needing a home because they, I guess, have their parents' home to go back to. So even though that one family of, let's call it 3 or 4 people, is using 2 or 3 houses in the year, they're only counted as needing one home. And I do now believe that rents over the next little bit could continue to see that upward pressure because, again, if you do not have your permanent residence card or your citizenship, you cannot buy a property. So the rental market is going to continue to probably inflate in specifically areas like where I am, Surrey and the Fraser Valley and the Greater Vancouver area and also the GTA. And it is said that the average PR, once they actually do immigrate here to Canada, rents for the first 5 years. So the amount of people that are coming in this year, that 500, 465,000, whichever number you believe, that did get their PR last year, well, they probably won't be buying on average for the next 3 or 4 years. And then the other extremely interesting insight from Ben Tal was the fact that, well, it appeared that nobody came to the country in, let's call it, second half of 2020 and 2021. However, the PRs that were handed out, the permanent residence cards that were handed out to students that were already here, far surpassed our immigration targets anyway, meaning that Canada imported a whole bunch of new population from within its own current population. And now what that does is potentially open up things like filling foreign student spots to an even higher amount than what we were previously ready to accept. And after reading this article, well, I'm personally glad that I own an investment property and it's actually making me in the long term. Now, this is not for 2023 and maybe 2024, but if I am thinking about my real estate from a 5, 10, or 20-year mindset and investment strategy, well, I'm really happy that I own and I'm extremely bullish on the market. And if you are too and would like to consider an investment property, you can book a call with me right now using the link in the description below. Thanks so much for subscribing, clicking the like button, and we'll see you in a couple of days.